Ibrahim Traore visits an orphanage home. You won't believe what happened next. In the heart of Burkina Faso's bustling capital, Ouagadougou, a dusty road lined with curious onlookers buzzed with anticipation on a sweltering morning in 2025. Word had spread like wildfire. Captain Ibrahim Traore, the enigmatic 36-year-old interim president and the world's youngest leader, was about to visit the modest Espoir d'Avenir orphanage. For a nation grappling with jihadist insurgencies, economic struggles, and a recent alleged coup attempt, this was no ordinary visit. It was a moment that promised hope, intrigue, and perhaps something extraordinary. Traore, known for his fiery anti-imperialist rhetoric and bold moves to align Burkina Faso with Russia while distancing it from former colonial power France, arrived in a convoy that was both understated and commanding. Unlike the lavish motorcades of some African leaders, his was a lean procession of military vehicles, a nod to his austere, revolutionary persona. Yet, the sight of his trademark green beret and camouflage fatigues, paired with a holstered pistol at his waist, sent a ripple of awe through the crowd. This was IB, as the youth called him, a man who, since seizing power in a 2022 coup, had become a symbol of defiance and dreams for a new Africa. As he stepped out onto the cracked earth in front of the orphanage, the air was thick with the chants of children and the rhythmic clapping of caregivers. The orphanage, a weathered building with peeling paint and a tin roof, housed 73 children, many of whom had lost their families to the relentless violence plaguing Burkina Faso's north and east. These children, some as young as 3, had seen more hardship than most adults, yet their eyes sparkled with curiosity as they caught sight of the man who, to them, was both a soldier and a savior. Traore's face, usually stern in televised addresses where he denounced Western lackeys or vowed to reclaim Burkina Faso's gold mines, softened as he knelt to greet a small girl clutching a tattered doll. "What's your name, little one?" he asked in Moor, his voice gentle but resonant. The girl, shy at first, whispered, "Aminata." The crowd erupted in cheers, sensing a rare glimpse of their leader's humanity. But what was he doing here? Rumors swirled. Was this a publicity stunt to bolster his image after the coup allegations? Or was there a deeper purpose to this unexpected visit? The orphanage director, Madame Fatoumata Diallo, a stout woman with a warm but weary smile, ushered Traore inside. The children had prepared a surprise, she hinted, her eyes twinkling with secrecy. As Traore crossed the threshold, the room exploded into a cacophony of song, a heartfelt rendition of a traditional Burkinabé lullaby sung by the children in mismatched clothing, their voices rising above the hum of a single ceiling fan. Traore froze, visibly moved, his hand resting on his chest as if to steady himself. For a man who had faced armed rebels and international condemnation, this moment seemed to catch him off guard. But then, something peculiar happened. As the song ended, a boy no older than 10, with a mischievous grin and a faded Manchester United jersey, stepped forward and handed Traore a folded piece of paper. The crowd hushed. Traore unfolded it, his brow furrowing as he read. Those close enough swore they saw his eyes widen, just for a split second, before he tucked the note into his pocket and flashed a cryptic smile. "This," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of a promise, "changes everything." What was on that note? Why had this boy, an orphan with no apparent connections, been chosen to deliver it? And what did Traore mean by everything? The crowd buzzed with questions, their excitement palpable. Little did they know this was only the beginning of a day that would unravel secrets, spark hope, and leave the nation on the edge of its seat. Traore, ever the soldier, regained his composure quickly. He clapped his hands, breaking the tension, and called out, "Let's see what these young warriors have prepared for us." His voice, warm yet commanding, drew laughter from the children, who scrambled to their places for a performance they'd rehearsed for weeks. But as they began a vibrant dance, weaving between tables adorned with colorful kente cloth, Traore's eyes kept darting to the boy who'd given him the note. The child, introduced by Madame Diallo as Kofi, sat quietly now, his mischievous grin replaced by an intense, almost knowing stare. The dance was a spectacle. Barefoot children twirling to the beat of a djembe drum, their movements telling stories of Burkina Faso's resilience. Yet, Traore seemed distracted, his fingers brushing the pocket where the note lay. Journalists present, their cameras clicking furiously, noticed the shift. Was this the same man who'd stared down French diplomats and rallied thousands with his calls for sovereignty? What could a child's note possibly contain to unsettle him? As the performance ended, Traore took the floor, his presence silencing the room. "These children," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion, "are Burkina Faso's future. They are not just orphans. They are our strength, our hope." The crowd roared in approval, but then he paused, his gaze locking onto Kofi. "And sometimes," he added, almost to himself, "they remind us of truths we've forgotten." The cryptic remark sent murmurs rippling through the room. Madame Diallo, sensing the need to keep the event on track, invited Traore to tour the orphanage's modest facilities. As they walked through cramped dormitories and a small garden where children grew yams and maize, Traore listened intently to Diallo's pleas for funding and security. The orphanage, she explained, had been targeted by bandits twice in the past year, a grim reminder of the insurgency creeping closer to the capital. Traore nodded, promising support, but his mind seemed elsewhere. Then, in a quiet moment by the garden, Traore pulled Kofi aside. The boy, barely reaching Traore's waist, stood unafraid, his eyes meeting the president's without flinching. The exchange was brief, their voices too low for others to hear, but those nearby caught snippets. "Hidden for years. And she told me to find you." Traore's face tightened, and he placed a hand on Kofi's shoulder, a gesture both protective and urgent. Reporters strained to capture the moment, their lenses zooming in, but Traore's security detail quickly formed a barrier, shielding the pair from view. As the tour continued, the atmosphere grew electric. Who was she? What was hidden, and why was this boy, an orphan with no known family, at the center of it all? Social media erupted with speculation, with hashtags like Traore Orphanage, a mystery, trending across Burkina Faso. Some claimed the note was a plea for help. Others whispered it might be linked to Traore's rumored enemies, plotting against him after the alleged coup attempt in April 2025. A few bold voices even suggested the supernatural, a message from Burkina Faso's ancestors, delivered through a child. Back inside, Traore sat with the children for a meal of tou, a sorghum-based dish served with okra sauce. He laughed as they teased him about his beret, but his eyes kept returning to Kofi, who now sat quietly, drawing on a piece of paper. When a caregiver collected the drawing, she gasped and quickly handed it to Madame Diallo, who tucked it away with a nervous glance at Traore. The president, mid-bite, noticed the exchange and set his bowl down, his expression unreadable. As the visit neared its end, Traore stood to address the crowd one last time. "Today," he said, his voice booming, "I came to see our children. But I leave with something far greater, a reminder that even in our darkest times, truth finds a way." He patted his pocket where the note remained and added, "And sometimes it comes from the smallest among us." The crowd erupted, but the questions burned brighter than ever. What was on Kofi's drawing? Who was the she he'd mentioned? And what truth could possibly shake a man like Ibrahim Traore? As he stepped toward his convoy, Kofi ran up, slipping something small into Traore's hand, a carved wooden pendant, glinting in the sunlight. Traore's fingers closed around it, and for a moment, he looked not like a president, but like a man staring into a past he'd long buried. Traore, clutching the pendants tightly, paused by his military jeep, his face a mask of resolve tinged with something deeper. Nostalgia, perhaps, or recognition. The pendant, small but intricately carved with a pattern resembling a baobab tree entwined with a serpent, seemed to weigh heavier than its size suggested. He slipped it into his pocket alongside the note. ignoring the clamor of journalists shouting questions from behind his security cordon. "What's in the note, Captain?" one yelled. "Who's the boy?" another demanded. Traore's only response was a steely glance before he climbed into the vehicle. But the day's surprises were far from over. As the convoy roared to life, Madame Diallo, the orphanage director, hurried forward, her face pale. She clutched Kofi's drawing, the one that had caused a stir during lunch, and pressed it into the hands of Traore's aide, whispering urgently, "He needs to see this. It's important." The aide, a stern lieutenant, nodded and tucked the paper away, but not before a journalist's camera caught a glimpse of the drawing. A crude but vivid sketch of a woman in a headscarf, standing beneath a baobab tree, with a child at her side. The image, shared instantly online, fueled speculation. Was this the she Kofi had mentioned? And why did it seem to unsettle everyone who saw it? Back at the orphanage, Kofi sat quietly on a bench, his eyes fixed on the departing convoy. A caregiver, Esata, knelt beside him, her voice gentle but probing. "Kofi, where did you get that pendant?" The boy, usually quick with a cheeky retort, was solemn. "She gave it to me," he said simply. "She said he'd come one day." Esata's brow furrowed. Kofi had arrived at the orphanage 3 years ago, malnourished and mute, with no record of his origins. His stories of a lady by the tree had been dismissed as childish fantasies. Until now. Meanwhile, in the armored jeep speeding toward the presidential palace, Traore unfolded Kofi's drawing. His fingers traced the lines of the woman's face, and for a moment, his stoic facade cracked. "Impossible," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. His aide, seated across from him, ventured cautiously, "Sir, do you know her?" Traore didn't answer, but his grip on the pendant tightened, and he pulled it out, studying its carvings as if they held a long-buried truth. The pendant, it turned out, was no ordinary trinket. Later that evening, as newsrooms scrambled to piece together the day's events, a Burkinaben historian on a popular TV panel dropped a bombshell. The baobab and serpent motif was tied to a rare cultural artifact from the Mossi people, Burkina Faso's largest ethnic group. Such pendants, he claimed, were once used by griots, traditional storytellers, to mark a pact or a prophecy. Similarly, were given to children destined to carry a message, he said, his words sending chills through the audience. If that boy gave it to Traore, it's no coincidence. The revelation ignited a firestorm. Was Kofi more than just an orphan? Was he chosen, somehow, to deliver a message to the president? And what did the drawing mean? Online sleuths began connecting dots, pointing to Traore's own past. Little was known about his early life beyond his military career and his rise to power in the 2022 coup, but rumors, long whispered in Ouagadougou's markets, resurfaced. Stories of a village tragedy, a lost family, and a young Ibrahim who'd once vowed to return for someone he'd left behind. As night fell, Traore sat alone in his office, the pendant and drawing spread before him. He hadn't spoken publicly since the visit, but sources close to the palace leaked that he'd cancelled all evening meetings, a rare move for a man known for his relentless schedule. The note, still unshared with even his closest aides, lay unfolded on his desk. Its contents remained a mystery, but one line, scrawled in a child's shaky handwriting, was later said to have haunted him. "She's waiting where the baobab stands." The nation held its breath. Was this a personal reckoning for Traore, a man who'd built his legacy on strength and secrecy? Or was it something larger, a message that could reshape Burkina Faso's future? As the clock ticked toward midnight, a single tweet from Traore's official account broke the silence. "Tomorrow I return to the orphanage. The truth must be known." Dawn broke over Ouagadougou with an electric tension gripping Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traore's cryptic tweet, "Tomorrow I return to the orphanage, the truth must be known," had set the nation ablaze with speculation. Social media platforms buzzed with theories about the mysterious note, Kofi's drawing, and the baobab and serpent pendant that seemed to hold a profound significance. Was this a personal quest for the interim president, or a revelation that could alter Burkina Faso's destiny? As Traore's convoy rolled back toward the Espoir de Vanier orphanage, the world watched, breathless. The orphanage was a fortress of anticipation. Crowds swelled outside, held back by stern-faced soldiers, while journalists jostled for position, their drones humming overhead. Inside, the children were quieter than the day before, sensing the gravity of the moment. Kofi, the 10-year-old at the heart of the mystery, sat on a stool, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Beside him, Madame Diallo clutched a worn ledger, her hands trembling. She'd spent the night combing through the orphanage's records, searching for answers about Kofi's past, but what she'd found only deepened the enigma. Traore arrived with none of the fanfare of his first visit. His convoy was smaller, his demeanor more somber. Stepping out, he wore the same camouflage fatigues, but the pendant now hung around his neck, glinting in the morning light. The crowd gasped. Its public display was a statement, a signal that whatever truth he sought was tied to that carved baobab and serpent. Without a word, he strode inside, his eyes locking onto Kofi. The boy stood, unafraid, and pointed toward the garden. "It's time," Kofi said simply, his voice cutting through the murmurs. What followed was a scene that would be etched into Burkina Faso's collective memory. Traore, Kofi, and Madame Diallo walked to the orphanage's small garden, where a young baobab tree stood, its branches barely reaching above their heads. A small crowd, caregivers, a few trusted aides, and one brave journalist who'd slipped through security, followed at a distance. Kofi knelt by the tree's base, digging with his hands until he unearthed a rusted metal box no larger than a book. He handed it to Traore, who stared at it as if it were a ghost from his past. The box, dented and caked with earth, bore the same baobab and serpent motif as the pendant. Traore's hands shook as he opened it, revealing a bundle of letters, a faded photograph, and a small, intricately woven bracelet. He lifted the photograph first, a young woman in a headscarf, smiling beside a boy who bore an unmistakable resemblance to a young Ibrahim. The crowd gasped. The journalist's camera clicked furiously. Traore's voice, usually steady, cracked as he whispered, "Aminata." The name sent a jolt through Madame Diallo. She stepped forward, her ledger open. "Kofi's mother," she said, her voice trembling. "Her name was Aminata. She brought him here 3 years ago, dying from fever. She said nothing about his father, only that someone would come for him. Under the baobab." The pieces fell into place, each one more staggering than the last. The note, the drawing, the pendant, they were all tied to Aminata, a woman from Traore's past, and Kofi, the son he never knew he had. Traore sank to his knees, clutching the letters. They were written in Aminata's hand, detailing a love cut short by war, a pregnancy hidden to protect a young soldier's rising career, and a promise to reunite one day beneath the baobab. The final letter, dated weeks before her death, instructed Kofi to find the man with the green beret and give him the pendant, a symbol of their bond, crafted by her own hands. The bracelet, woven with threads of green and gold, matched one Traore wore beneath his uniform, a secret he'd kept for years. The revelation was seismic. Traore, the stoic revolutionary, was a father. Kofi, the orphan with the mischievous grin, was his son. The crowd wept, even the soldiers wiped their eyes, but Traore, ever the leader, rose to his feet, Kofi at his side. "This boy," he declared, his voice booming across the garden, "is my blood, my future. And through him I see Burkina Faso's truth. We are a family, bound by loss, but stronger in love." The nation erupted. News of Traore's son spread like wildfire, with Kofi Traore trending globally. Some saw it as a miracle, others a masterstroke of political theatre, but none could deny its power. Traore announced that Kofi would join him at the presidential palace, and the orphanage would receive funding to become a model for others across the country. No child, he vowed, will be left behind. As the convoy departed, Traore and Kofi sat together, the pendant now shared between them. The letters, read late into the night, revealed Aminata's dream, a Burkina Faso where children like Kofi could thrive, free from war and want. Traore, once driven by defiance, now carried a softer mission, one that began with a boy, a note, and a truth unearthed beneath a baobab. Bekarnese would never be the same, neither would Ibrahim Traore.